Somebody asked me over here, asked me about what kind of tools do you use to create, if you're going to do a cultivated fallow. You want something that creates a firm seed bed. So discs do that, but of course with repeated trips over a field with discs, you can create a disc band. I think probably the ideal tool is either a roller harrow or a spring-time cultivator or a field cultivator followed by Cultivating. You got to have the firm soil, and so you need the Cultivating. Of course, a roller harrow is just a spring-time harrow with a roller behind it. And, so you can create the same thing with two tools or one tool. But anyway, that's probably the best way to do it. Time meters don't work that well. I mean, they're okay, but they're not great. And the reason is that they leave too fluffy a soil surface for the next flush of germination that you want to create. If you're only going to do it once, you're going to kill them. You kill them maybe with a time meter if you've got a good time. Done experiments where the time meter didn't work very well. So, that answer your question?
I guess the harrow, is that like a roller that has the V kind of tracks on it, like tread on shoes, that's raised, so it breaks down the blades on top?
It's got shanks that look sort of like this, only they're probably lighter. It's like something, it looks like this, only there'll be about 4 tiers of those. And you can adjust the angle. You can adjust the depth and the angle of the tool.
What I saw was...
Half the farms in New York have one sitting in the hedgerow someplace. You can buy it for $150.
Well, I've been going down to Central PA a lot, and they're organic certifying bodies in Spring Mills PA where we do this training, and they had a pamphlet I went to bring today that had, it looked like a roller people would use to heat
Like
up.
a cylinder with grooves on it?
Yes. Well, it also chop down the little crop residue as well. So it's more like...
It's a crop, yeah, it's a roller. It actually bends the, it puts cakes in
roller
it.
crimper. No, that's a completely different.
So.
Yeah, that's for killing cover crops without killing. Okay. And then flaming is the usual way people create stale seed beds. And the reason it's a stale seed bed is you're not disturbing it before you plant. That's where the term comes from. So you're killing the weeds with the flame, and if you're bed flaming, it's good to have a canopy over the flamers to retain the heat. That way you don't use as much fuel. You greatly reduce your fuel input. It's a great system for parsnips and carrots, which are notoriously, you can't transplant them, and so you got to hand weed them in the tiny little plants and tiny little weeds. And but a stale seed bed works really well. You create the bed, you flame it. The weeds come up, you flame it, and then another flush comes up, usually before the crop emerges, because parsnips and carrots are very slow to emerge. So you let the next crop the next flush of weeds come up, and just before the crop comes up, you go through and you flame again. And so your crop emerges into a relatively weed-free condition. Most of the weeds that were prompted to germinate by your tillage have germinated, several weeks before, and your hand weeding is then great. Any other questions about this before I start talking about time weeding?
In that last picture, was that preceded by a bed shaper? Did a bed shaper?
Yeah. Their beds had been created and firmed, and the weeds had come up, and now they're going through and killing the weeds before they planted.
Chuck, maybe this isn't the appropriate time to ask this question, but have you done any work using flame weeding in sweet corn?
Only in my own home garden. I've got a hand flamer that I use all the time in my sweet corn at home. It's great because you can kill the weeds that are coming up really close to corn stalk where you can't get them with a hoe. And
And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something I need to be looking at doing differently other than using a row cultivator. And keeping the weeds under control is a real pain because you don't get much of a crop canopy this week.
Yeah, it's not very, it's amazing that something that's so tall can be such a poor competitor.
Yeah.
I mean, it tolerates weeds relatively well, but it doesn't compete with weeds effectively at all. Yeah, the flamer works real well in that. You gotta get the leaves have to be above where the flame is going. As you'll burn them, if they're hanging over down into the path of flame, you'll definitely get burned. But as long as you're going, you want the angle kind of like this, coming in.
Going down.
And actually, Fred, did you say is Fred still here? I think Fred said he had a backpack flamer. We might,
Yes.
I'd like to demonstrate how you should use the flamer, because a lot of people do this with it, and that's no good. Tine weed eaters are probably the primary tool we use for in-row weed control. And so I'm going to spend some time on tine weed eaters and how they work and how best to use them. And in general, the point of a tine weeder is to kill the weeds that are in the row. Mostly you don't care much about what the tines are doing between the rows, because you're probably going to come in very soon with some heavier piece of steel and get those weeds that are between the row. So it's really the weeds in the row that you're trying to get with the tine weed. We often tine weed before the crop comes up. So you've got a large seeded crop, say snap peas, sweet corn, peas, something like that, and potatoes down here in the ground. They're germinating. You got all these weeds that are germinating. Maybe they've come up, maybe some haven't actually emerged yet. They're just white, wormy things in the soil. And you take your tine weeder across there and you disturb that surface soil layer and kill those little weeds. You break them or you stir it up so they can dry out that surface layer of the soil and kill the weeds. You don't want to be going so deep that you're disturbing these your crop seeds that are just starting to germinate. And then once the crop is established, you can come in and the crop will be up here like this, and you can go through, and the tines are flexible enough that they won't damage a lot of crops when the crop is young. If the crop has a taproot, like a bean or a carrot, you can go a little deeper maybe and weed down in this area later after the taproot is established. Okay, next slide. So this is one of many designs of tine weeder. There are various ways in which the tine weeder gangs. This is the gang here. This is the frame, or the wishbone, sometimes called. That this is attached to this, and often there's a chain in the front. With the Williams, you'll see, I believe it's mounted. This is an Einbach. It's mounted in the back. Some of them are chains in both positions. Some of them are chains in both positions, but there's a press plate on the gang, and you can transfer PTO. I'm sorry, not PTO, but you can transfer tractor weight with a 3-point pitch back on there. And remember what I said, all cultivators have to be level when they're going through the field. And if you just drop this thing down, these front tines are going to go deep, the back tines are going to go shallow. Almost always. Different kind of tine weeder. This is a Cobar. Probably the cheapest tine weeder out there. These long shanks. Notice the spacing is much further apart. These vibrate more because they're longer. A longer shank is more flexible than a short shank. A thick shank is less flexible than a thin shank on the tine. So just a different design. This happens to be one that's suspended by chains on both sides. You don't see the wishbones attached. This is just a gang on this side. So again, the same Cobar, showing that all tine weeders you can adjust the angle of the Some of them that's easier to do, some of them it's harder. Next slide.
Why would you adjust them from the previous slide to this?
Well, this is much more aggressive. This is going to dig into the soil deeper. Tear out the weeds better, maybe tear out your crop too.
I've heard of people cultivating with a time meter in row, so that they lift up the tines that will hit the row, in row.
So they lift the tines in the row.
And then they cultivate between rows.
Yeah, with the
Is
tines.
that-
Just
is
the
that-
tines are just cultivating between the rows.
Yeah, is that?
I see no point in doing it.
Yeah.
You know, one thing is if you cultivated the weeds, that can lift them out of the soil, so that they desiccate better. But normally, I figure, you know, the row crop cultivator is probably going to take care of those weeds that are in the row. This is just a chart. It's in your handout, so just so that you have the information. These different brands are just different. They're different in a bunch of different ways. They have, you know, shank diameter, the length of the tine, they have different kinds of steel too, so that, you know, some iron box steel is pretty stiff. This is a really stiff machine. You probably don't want it for vegetable production. Haven't worked much with Cobar, but I just don't like the fact that the tines are so far apart. They're just not dense enough for my taste. The angle of the bend is critical. Fred was telling me before we started that he had ripped out a bunch of leeks with his Williams. We have a Rabe Berg, and I just love the Rabe Berg. The company's out of business, and there weren't very many imported into the United States. However, Hatzenbickler is sold in New York State, and I'm not sure the dealer, but I know they're available here, and it's virtually identical to the Rabe Berg. I saw at a trade show, I saw a Hatzenbickler across the room. I went, whoa, the Rabe Berg! I walked up to it, you know, it's a Hatzenbickler. Well, what's different? Nothing's different. This is the machine I use, you know, every summer, multiple times. I'm sorry, what? Somebody had a question?
The question is, what is it that you like about it? Or you feel?
Okay, what I like about it, 45-degree tines. This is not, this steep angle on the tine is why you ripped up your leeks. If you had a lower angle on the tines, you wouldn't have dug under the, you know, leeks have a very diffuse root system, right?
Yeah.
And you dug under it and just flipped them out of the ground. This is a very good tool for getting grassy weeds out of tap-rooted crops. So for beans, you know, for snap beans or peas, this is a great tool. Okay? For a lot of other crops, it's not so great because, you know, that angle, corn, sweet corn, it's a poor machine because, again, you've got this diffuse root system and that steep hook is easily whipped out. Number two, the tines are too far apart, so they're not getting the weeds as effectively as they could be. Third, they're not stiff enough. Now, sometimes you want those limp tines because you're doing some kind of really delicate crop, but for most of the crops we tine weed, they can take more punishment than these tines deliver, and you want the punishment in order to get the weed. So that's why. I mean, I've got a lately, I hardly ever use it, use the Rabe Berg.